Welcome everybody to the War Room. This is the pregame show for the March OCC, and do we ever have a heck of a show for you? Not only do we have the two previous OCC winners competing today, we also have Innocent Bubbles, our casting cohort, who is actually in the top 8 today. These 8 players are going to be competing for a $1,000 prize pool. Now, here in the pregame show, we love getting you up to speed with exactly what you're going to see in less than an hour. In just a few moments, I'm going to be joined by Oli, Darkness, and Spooz to walk you through the decks, the players, so you can get to know them just a little bit better. But before we get there, let's take a look at the bracket so you can see exactly who will be competing for that $1,000 prize pool. So here we have in the top half of the bracket, you have Tang Tang, the artist formerly known as XY, so no stranger to the OCC. They will be taking on, as I mentioned previously, Innocent Bubbles. I'm excited to see what kind of deck list Bubbles is bringing. I know he's usually a big fan of the combos of the OTKs, so I'm excited to see some spiciness there. We've got J King taking on Dion in the second matchup. Now, this is going to be a huge one, a battle of the Titans, per se. As we drop down into the bottom half of the bracket, we have Artemisia against newcomer The Man. And in the last matchup, No In 5 is taking on Kato. Again, this is a $1,000 prize pool for when we crown the winner of the March OCC. First place taking down 500 USD. Second place gets 300. Third place, a paltry $200. Not bad at all for a day's work. So let's get you introduced to the players. Let's get you introduced to the decks. Let's get you introduced to the 3 wonderful humans who will be joining me for this March OCC. Here we have them. Oli, Darkness, Spooz. Oli, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's OCC day, right? That's always the best day of the month. Only rivaled by Cards Open Finals Day, whenever that falls within the same month. So, I'm more than excited. I've also, we've been taking a look at the decks, and each OCC that passes, man, we just keep getting more creative decks. We keep seeing the diversity go up. There is a commando deck today, like an unironic commando deck. There's also an unironic countermeasure deck. I'm gonna let you guess once which player is bringing both of these, right? It's yeah, you know it. It's the crazy person Dion. So I'm more than excited.
I mean, you say that, Oli, but between Bubbles, Dion, I mean, we have newcomers. You never know. You never know what kind of spice we might see. Darkness, how are you feeling on this March OCC finale day?
Well, I'm hyped to see this OCC pulling off. There are some very interesting matchups. Some very unique players are here today, like J King with his control, Rubble with some spice, No In 5 with his aggro, and then more very strong tournament stacks are coming. Personally, I feel okay due to the fact I actually have COVID, but I'm vaccinated 3 times, so I'm actually fine. So yeah, let's get this thing rolling.
Yeah, the
Awesome,
Rona
Darkness.
ain't got nothing on Darkness.
Spooz, do you share in the excitement that both Darkness and Oli have coming into today with the variety we're going to be seeing deck-wise?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the most impressive part is that we have Christo, Darkness, Oli, Spooz, and Bubbles on the show. How is that even possible? Yeah, I'm really rooting for Bubbles here today, and also interested to see Dion's decks and how they play out. I tried some of them, and I was not too successful, but yeah, that's probably because I'm not Dion. So really excited for today's shows.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Spooz. It's one thing to bring a deck list. It's another thing to be able to pilot it properly. So we're going to dive into that in just a second. You also made mention that, the 4 of us plus Bubbles are going to be on the show. We may also have a little surprise coming up during the actual cast of the OCC. You will have to tune in to find out exactly what I'm talking about. Now, Spooz, you talked about Bubbles. You talked about pulling for Bubbles. He will be in our first matchup today. So why don't we take a little dive into the Bubbles versus Tang Tang matchup? As I mentioned previously, Tang Tang, actually formerly known as XY, so no stranger to competing in some high-level events. So we've got the player cards loaded up for you. We've got the deck list loaded up for you. So let's take a look. Why don't we start with Tang Tang on the top of the bracket? So I believe we'll be diving into the player profile momentarily here.
There we go.
Yeah, right. We got it loaded up. Now, Ollie, I know you love looking at these. You love seeing the total number of matches. The win rate, though, 70% coming in first this season. Now, that's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be across the board. It's very rare that we see someone in the Officer Club that has, less than 60% win rate. 70% is obviously just absurd. Maintaining that over 8,000 matches is also just crazy. And, we keep talking about this. A 51% or a 55% win ratio is really good. That's going to get you to the top, in most games. But these players are showing that they're consistently beating the field and they're maintaining this win ratio. I also just like the fact that, his most played is Germany, but his favorite card is Monty. So, what's up with that? Why not playing more Monty? Why not more Britain? But I think this just gives us a nice little look into the resume of these players. You don't want to face Tang Tang. That's just for sure. He's I believe under the nickname XY, he did win a previous OCC, or at least place in the money. So this guy's tried, tested, proven himself over and over again. But he's not going to be facing any slouch. He's going to be facing a veteran in Bubbles.
Now, Darkness, you are also no stranger to competing at a high level. Have you come face to face with XY in the past? What are your thoughts on their style and their gameplay?
Well, I saw XY, now Tang Tang in multiple tournaments. He's a well-known tournament player in cards. I think I remember him from the World Championship or maybe World Championships. I need to find his old name tag. Did he change his name in cards as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. This confused me a little bit when I prepared for this. But, well, I can tell he's a man of culture. Well, most played Germany, and Monty is my favorite card as well. So, yeah, I'm rooting for Tang Tang already.
Awesome. Well, Spooz, you talked about rooting for Bubbles. Let's get Bubbles' card up here. Having finished 18th in the season, that 61% win rate, representing Wales.
Yeah, representing Wales and most placed Great British. So this guy is just the representation of the Commonwealth. And what I'm a little bit sad about is that the favorite card is not the cup of tea. Not sure why he shows the parachutes there, but yeah, look at the total matches there. So experience-wise, double the amount of matches that Tang Tang is having, and 61% win rate, also impressive. And if you consider with this win rate that he's also playing a little bit of meme decks on stream, and it is still impressive that it's above 60%. And season finish 18th, so he fought himself through the qualifiers to be here today. And I think one of the reasons he wanted to be here today is to see his win rate here. Because usually you don't have that information, and it's always interesting for the players to see that one.
17,000 total matches. That is a huge number. Like you said, Spooz, playing some memes, playing some combos, playing some gimmicks, but nonetheless coming out with a 61% win rate is absolutely impressive. We, of course, have Bubbles representing Eastern Front team. So going into this matchup, why don't we dive into the decks? Why don't we start by taking a look at what Tang Tang is bringing? Bubbles is known for something a little bit less classic. What do we have here? Darkness, let's take a look at what Tang Tang has brought.
Yeah, this first one, I'm a big fan of this control deck. It's German Italy control. It does have a lot of anti-aggro, as you can see. 3 times Careless Talk, 2 Sudden Strikes, 2 Flam Panzers, a Bologna Regiment, Root Out. So overall, this looks like a really strong anti-aggro list. But through the mid game, you are looking against 2 decisive defenses, envelop, and I don't know how he managed it, but he was able to put a lot of late game into this deck as well with Penta G, Tiger IE, Schwalbe Leopold. This deck, if you look on the curve, it looks so well designed. I want to play this myself, and I'm happy to see matches with such great control decks. This deck is so strong overall. Well, Germany is known for cards that can act in any possible ways. But yeah, this deck can beat anything.
Awesome. I do love the fact that when you have that flexibility, it makes your matchups against things that aren't, let's say, aggro better, or it gives you that flexibility that if you do draw poorly, you can act in different ways. You can be flexible with your list and you're not stuck hoping to draw your stopping cards. Now, let's jump into Tang's second deck here. Spooz, what are you seeing with this list?
Yeah, second deck is a Brit US control deck with a little bit of ramp in it, with the newly changed United We Stand in it, which is really, really strong at the moment. Replaced War Machines completely, I guess. Can give you some good removal with the potential of ramp there. And then he's also playing 2 an Hour of Need, just to have the follow-up for the turn 2 United We Stand, and you can play the an Hour of Need on turn 3. And from there on, you can just drop your big units like the not the Wellington, but the, how is it called? Holy moly. Like Black Watches, you can do this. You can come with Lancaster, Mosquito, the Churchill, like all the big heavy cards that have such strong deployment effects. And yeah, a lot of control. You have Monty, you have the second Paracy that was introduced with the latest expansion. A very strong British card. You can pincer any unit, and when both of these units or any of these units is dealing damage, the unit dies, which is a really strong effect. And yeah, this deck is designed to just control your opponent. I don't see a real win condition in it. I mean, he's having a lot of units with big amount of HP, and then you have cards like the Alliance in it, and you can just buff your board and just overwhelm your opponent with pure force. But there's no Commonwealth in it, no Ruby Tenure. So it's basically just controlling the board, buffing your units, and then, as I said, overwhelm your opponent and win with that.
What about this third deck, Ollie? What do we got coming up third for Tang?
Well, there you see a very popular deck with the Chinese community specifically, and I believe it's No 5 that's kind of pioneering that deck within that community, and a lot of people seem to really like it. And I just got checked that this is not a control or a slow deck, right? It is a mid-range deck in terms of how it plays, but the popularity of this deck has gotten to the point where I know, and we will see in just a second when we go over to Bubbles, is that people have started specifically teching against this. This is strong. You are able to, generate the mass amount of legions, pour on a lot of pressure, and if your opponent doesn't have the answers, they will crumble under that pressure. But I'm excited to jump on over to Bubbles' decks, because we're going to see some interesting cards that have never seen the light of day in an OCC before, that are being purposely brought because of the popularity of this deck.
Now, normally when I see Dion competing in a tournament, I make sure I have my cards client open to be able to double check for some of those cards that we don't see very often. I feel like with Bubbles here, it is the same type of situation. Let's keep it with you, Ollie. I know you said you were excited to see what Bubbles is bringing or to talk about it. What's going on in this first USA Britain list?
Yeah, this is a super interesting one. I mean, it's USA Britain. You got 4 War Machines. You got 2 United We Stands. You got 3 War Bonds. You got 3 an Hour of Need. This is like a lot of ramp that is packed into this. But then you're, supplementing that with all the value in the world. And this is just how we know US ramp is being played. You got the 101st Airborne, you got the Avengers, B-17s. He's also rocking the B-17F. And this has been an extremely kind of difficult card to deal with. It can't be targeted with orders. It's 6/6. It's a bomber. And it has heavy armor 1. The only downside of this card is when your opponent just drops an Errado and saves his HQ. But then you go over to the Brit side, and that's where the fun starts. He's got Delaying Tactics. So Delaying Tactics basically pushes everybody in the front line back into the back line. Now, if that back line is full, it'll just push it into hand. If that hand is full, it'll just vanish off the face of the earth. So the idea here is that you have strategic bombing and stars and stripes. So you have 3 backline AoE orders, and you have 2 ways of pushing everything in the front line into the backline. So this is specifically teched in here against these Polish legions that really like to flood the board and have a full backline and maybe 3 or 4 units in the front line. And being able to just shove all that back, wipe the board, you can have your opponent overdraw, force them to re-spend credits to deploy those units. And I'm really excited to see if this has a wider use as a tactic outside of just facing that Polish US Legion stack.
I have no doubt that somebody like Bubbles, who has 17,000 games under their belt, will be able to find some alternative use cases for a list like this. Darkness, we're flipping the ally and the main on this next list. We have got these Brit US deck. What do we see in here?
Well, on the first look, it looks like Brit US ramp. Very usual these days, very strong, very popular in tournaments. United We Stand is a very nice addition, gives you more, with a recent change to this card, more removal while ramping, what is very important for this kind of deck. But as Ollie mentioned, Bubbles is playing Delaying Tactics, not with Stars and Stripes in this deck, and with the Typhoon Mark 1B. I think this is the first time I saw this card in a tournament. It's an 5/4 fighter for 4 credits. That's why it's fine. And the effect of this card is when a ground unit retreats, draw a card. So he can. Yes.
I just want to say, Darkness, I think this is the first time that I've seen a Typhoon in a deck that wasn't my own. Like, that's the rarity of this card. I've never seen this card played apart from myself playing it a week ago. That's it.
Well, I played a lot of cards, close to 3,000 hours, and I can say I saw this card maybe 5 times from my opponent. Half of those times were in draft.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I wonder how this combo is working. Like, in theory, you have 6 credits, dropping the Typhoon, retreating all legions from the front line into the support line or into hand, and this is a massive card draw against legions. I'm happy to see this combo because it's basically new. Looking at the rest of the deck, it's just the typical ramp and value with Sexton, Shelling, Carpet Bombing, Churchill, of course, and he's playing 2 B17s, so it's a little bit more late game, a little bit more tech against control, like German control, Soviet control. Looks like Bubbles overall is very well prepared against tanks, control and legions decks. Well, for his first 2 decks. What about his last deck? I think it's Spooz time.
Yes, Spooz, talk to me. We got Soviet and Italy.
Sure. So this is a well-known deck that has been in the meta for a while now. It is Soviet Italy control, like a deck that, as the name is saying, it's just control. You have a lot of guards. You had a lot of healing. You have cards like First Rifles, which is very good value against aggressive decks. It gives you 2 guards for 1. It has some cool combos also. He's playing it with Winter Warfare, that 1k order that is dealing 1 damage to all units. And then he's having the ISU in the deck. That is a tank that on deployment destroys all damaged units. So for 10 credit, you have a full board clear potentially. Interesting to see is that he's playing it with 5-year plan. A card that on paper looks very strong, 5k, draw 5 cards. In disadvantage to this, you get to 5 damage to your own HQ. sounds like a fair trade if you have 3 more Nostrums in your deck and Fiats that gives you a lot of healing. But usually 5-card draw is just too much. That means you have to be at 5 cards and then you draw 5 more, you're at 9 again. So it is a good card when you face this card, for example, and your hand is getting very, very slow on or low on cards, and then you can drop a 5-year plan, refill your hand for 5 credits. That is good for that, but usually, as I said, it's just a little bit too much draw. Then he's also prepared against air with this deck. He has 52k in the deck. Triple T60, that is a 2/4 guard tank that on destruction gives you a T34. That is a 5/5 tank with Blitz. A very strong unit to also give a little bit pressure back to your opponent. When you have 2 of these in your hand, your opponent knows whenever you want, you can just deal 5 damage to face, and the next turn 5 damage again. So it also, you can play it very defensive, but you can also play it a little bit more offensive, and very strong removal in it, like Lion for a Day, Ladeshimar. So overall, I'm not surprised that he's bringing this deck. It's very strong overall. It has some good matchups in tournaments so far, and good success so far. So yeah, that is a third deck, and really interested to see how the matchups go.
I'm gonna go on a limb. I'm gonna say I hope that third deck gets banned because I want to see the Typhoon decks and the lane tactics.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Ollie. But in a scenario like this, what's worse, the devil you know or the devil you don't? Do you say, what is this Typhoon stuff and I don't want to deal with it? Or do you say, I don't think this is very good, I want to take my shot against it?
I mean, I think given the fact that Tang is bringing USA Legions, I think he should ban one of the 2 decks, right? I mean, they're specifically teched against it, and I think it's pretty obvious. You look at the AoE that you have in those decks compared to the Soviet deck, right? In the Brit USA deck, he's got 2 carpet bombs and he's got 2 stars and stripes. In the USA Brit deck, he's got strategic bombing and he's got 2 stars and stripes. There's a lot of AoE in those decks. You don't want to face AoE as legions. So I think it's a given if you're Tang that you ban one of those decks. Do you guys agree, Spooz Darkness?
100%. Well, Tang is bringing legions and 2 control decks, so I'm expecting him to ban Bubbles' ramp deck, teched against other control and legions. This would be an obvious choice for me. What do you think, Spooz?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That ramp deck is really, really strong against Tang's lineup. I expect Bubbles to ban the German Italy from Tang, and I think Tang is also expecting this. And I think with the remaining 2 decks, that US Brit deck is the hardest to fight against. So I think he's going to ban that. Yeah.
No, I agree with that. I think Bubbles definitely bans Germany, Italy, right? Like you don't want to deal with night hunters. You don't want to deal with from the deeps and stuff as you get into the late game after you ramp and all that kind of stuff. You don't want your B-17Fs getting caught by a night hunter, right? It's just like a waste of a turn.
For the sake of time, let's continue to move forward. We have 3 more matchups to break down and dissect. We have J-King versus Dion coming up next. Now, this is going to be a battle of the Titans. We have Dion, who took home the OCC in January, J-King, who took it home in February. So this is going to be a heck of a first round matchup. Let's dive into J-King's card representing Canada. So close to home, just down the road. 16,000 total matches here. That's 68% win rate. We have seen J-King over and over again compete at the highest of levels. Darkness, Night Witches, J-King's favorite card.
Yeah, he loves this card. But he always remembers the card when this card used to give you endless bombers, like you're using this order and you shuffle this order into your deck and you're getting 1 bomber and 1 from the people to hand, because he just loves those fatigue matches, those endless lasting games. I think he thinks this card currently is strong, but he still demands to change Night Witches again to make it even stronger, or to give it back the endless factor.
Based on J King's style of loving those fatigue games, I am not surprised. Representing Team Ammo, we've got J King, who finished 4th this season, taking on Dion, relative newcomer. I mean, we said that in January, and look at what they have done since. 4,000 total matches, Ollie. 4,000. That is a small number compared to what we've seen with J King, what we've seen with Bubbles, and what we've seen with some of the other players who are competing here today.
Yeah, I mean, like I said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't know where this guy came from. He just burst out onto the scene. He was a 9-month-old player when he made his first OCC appearance. He's been shocking everyone with the decks that he's bringing. A very creative player, and I would say a very kind of thought out pilot of his decks. He tends to make decisions that make these combo decks work at the very edge of their capabilities, so to speak. And I think that's the difference between, you know, being Dion and not being Dion when it comes to running his decks. You know, it's as simple as that. I feel like every time we cast his games, we at least one point, you know, our face becomes 3 question marks, just as we try to figure out what's going on.
Well,
Absolutely. I love seeing that. I love having a newcomer come in and bring some fresh blood, bring some fresh lists, bring a fresh style. So we're going to jump into Dion's decks in just a moment. We're going to start with J King here. Now, Darkness, I know that you typically, you know, you practice with J King a lot of scrimmages preparing with him. So let's have you walk us through all 3 of J King's decks. Give us some insight into what J King's bringing here today.
All right, Christo. Well, if you remember the last OCC, this deck barely has changed. Well, J King is using 1 Para C. This one he added to this deck. And this is the main change. It's still his German Britain control deck with a lot of discard. This deck is very strong against aggro because it has a lot of anti-aggro, even 1 fortification, 1 heal card, and yeah, it targets not only aggro but like experimental decks as well, and decks with not enough card draw. So if a deck is not well designed, or if a deck is missing card draw, discard is really hurting you. This, for example, myself, I'm playing Brit Air on ladder or J aggro to climb as fast as possible. When you're running out of cards, you basically lost. And this is the idea of the first deck. Then, looking at the second deck, it's nearly the same deck, but vice versa with the allies. It's Brit Germany as well. You have more heal here with Honey. J King was able to add 2 second Para C, an amazingly strong card from the last expansion. The pincer unit, it's a pincer unit, and this gives another unit the pincer effect. Units dealt combat damage by this unit are destroyed. Like the first commando, you can play this on anything, like an Seaforce Highlander, 1 damage gone, or on a bomber, and you attack into anything, and it's just gone. What is very valuable for this kind of anti-aggro control deck, because against heavy control or ramp deck, you often lack the possibility of dealing with big threats. Like, what do you do against a Penta G or Tiger IE in the front line? Basically nothing at that point, but with the second paracord, you can deal with that. So this is a little nice buff from the last expansion to this deck. And interesting is the last one, because I think J King prepared here with Bubbles a lot. He's not only using 2, he's using 3 delaying tactics. And bringing US Brit ramp is not typical for J King. He didn't do this for 2 or 2.5 years now, after we both experienced an yeah, we just got ripped. We just got destroyed in an OCC when we tried to bring this by Ray when he won his first OCC. But apparently, US Brit is back.
It is so good. It is so good.
Yeah. Mainly after the United We Stand change, now it's an way to deal against early aggro, like in Cavalry Regiment or Panzer 35T. It's just killing anything with 1 or 2 damage, with 1 or 2 HP. And it ramps as well, so this card is very flexible and way better than the War Machine, while War Machine is in basically any ramp deck. So this is a great buff. In combination with delaying tactics and Stars and Stripes against Legion, now enough ramp to maybe make Quartermasters looking good. This would be cool, and this needs to be seen. And of course a lot of big threats. The full bombing, Avenger and Fortress package, B-17F, and Seaborne Invasion and Mass Deployment as late game threats, while Seaborne Invasion also combines nicely with Stars and Stripes, putting everything into the support line or to hand, preparing for the big AoE. I really want to see this in action.
I agree.
So we've got J King bringing mostly typical J King type of things, and then we've got this this ramp deck added on. But Spooz, walk me through the shenanigans that Dion has on deck for us today.
Yeah, talking about J King bringing J King things, we just see Dion bringing Dion things. I'm a little bit sad here that Ollie cannot call us through the first deck, because he would love to see that. It is a Britain-Japan commando deck, but not just that. It is also a credit denial deck, so it also has the target to destroy your opponent's credits count. Like look at this. He's only playing 2 Japanese cards, and this is the Southern Plan, the card that got introduced in, I think, the expansion before the last one. A card that gives you 1 extra credit slot and lets your opponent lose 1 credit slot. Very, very annoying if you can combine this, for example, with a turn 1 Observer Corps, and then turn 2 you play Southern Plan. Very annoying for your opponent. As I can see here, oh yeah, he's even playing 4 Observer Corps, so we might see that combo even. And then there are cards like Blockade, Blackwatch, the Raid. So many cards that just deal or destroy your opponent's game plan whenever your opponent thinking, oh, next turn I want to do this, but then there's a raid, so he's not having that plan fulfilled next turn, and it is very, very annoying to play against it. And then you have the commandos for your, let's say, win condition, with all these cheap orders like Cup of Tea, and you also have the Honey, the Commonwealth in it, so you have several ways to deal with your opponents. So it's not like playing your game, it's more like you're playing your opponent's game. Like, you decide what he's going to do next turn and what not. Mm-hmm. And it's very cool if it goes off. It can also be a little bit, once it falls behind, I think you might have a problem against decks that have big units like the ramp decks. But then you always have the long range desert group to maybe find a comeback with the commandos on board. So it also has some potential, and I want to see this deck in action. And if it's really going well for Dion here, it's just very, very annoying for J King to play against this.
Now, Ollie, I see the smile on your face. I see it. I know that you will be casting this matchup. So for the sake of time, keep it short. Save your comments for the main show.
I'm just saying, please don't ban this deck, J King, please.
Thank you, Ollie. Let's continue on. Spooz, what do we got next?
Exactly. Next one is a deck we know very well. We've seen this a lot in the last year and also in the beginning of this year. This is the Japan-Germany Feint Retreat deck. A very aggressive Japan deck. You have some very high aggressive 1-drops like the 15th Cavalry Regiment, you have the Bicycle Regiment. And then you also have Befehlswagen, that unit, once you move into the front line, it also gets deployed from your hand. So in the best case, you have like a 2-1 and a 2-2 in the front line on turn 1 there. That can be very hard to deal with for your opponent. And yeah, we saw this deck a lot, so let's not talk too much about it. And let's better jump into the third deck that Dian is bringing. A deck everybody was thinking when we first saw this, is he serious about this deck? Like, look at this. It is a German US. I don't know what to call it. I would call it a countermeasure deck, because it has the 87 Grenadiers in it. And then he has like Blumenvoss, Lurking Danger, Entrapment, Airstrike. Like all the countermeasures you can imagine. Night Hunters from the Deep, Missing, Careless Talk. So 90% of the deck is countermeasures. But then he also has like 2nd California in it, Patriotic Zeal, and then look at this card there at the bottom for Germany, Exploit the Gap. We're seeing Exploit the Gap in an OCC. Who would have ever thought this? And then you also have Uncle Sam. Triple Uncle Sam. So I played a Leopold printer deck where you just have Leopold and the rest is removal, and you wait for your Leopold to draw and then you copy it, and you can just destroy your opponent with all these Leopolds that you can deploy, because you can never develop a board there. And I think we might see something like this. I'm not sure. So we all have not been sure how it's working. If you get a 0 credit Leopold with the Exploit the Gap and then reprint it with the Uncle Sam, I have the opinion it will be a 10 credit, but it would be insane if it would be 0 credits. That would be the most insane thing I've seen in a while. But I'm not sure how good this deck is, honestly. Countermeasures usually are good when you play in ladder and your opponent is not expecting them. But 87 Grenadiers is a big tell that you might play countermeasures.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think J-King has some ways to play around it. But also, you need to develop a board at some point, right? And with all these countermeasures, every unit that you deploy is probably just getting killed. But I have a feeling, we're not at this point yet, but I have a feeling that J-King might ban this deck, because it can be very annoying for him to deal with this.
Knowing countermeasures are coming is one thing. Being able to play around all the countermeasures is a whole different thing. All of you were losing your mind as Spooz was walking you through that list. What's going on? What's going through your head?
When the 87th Grenadiers came out the first time, I made a countermeasure deck that was all about like creating massive 87th Grenadier cards, Grenadiers, and it worked sometimes, right? And when it worked, it would be like, you know, a 45 unit or something crazy like that, right? But then there was those games where, you know, all of a sudden they would just get like a sudden strike on my 25 unit, and it's just gone. So I want to see this work. But at the same time, I kind of don't, because I really don't want to be running into this deck on ladder. Because you're going to be like, oh, he's playing Germany. Oh, it's going to be German aggro or Germany control. Great. And then you just go, okay, careless talk. Careless talk. Oh, he just played a Grenadiers. Oh my God. And you get stopped, right? So mixed feelings on this one.
Yeah, I want to mention one thing. The biggest weakness of this variant with the 87 Grenadiers is that you don't have Britain as ally. You can't have evasive action, and you can't have secret operatives. So there's so much. Your opponent can just play United We Stand on it, and it's dead, and you cannot really protect it. And I think that might be the weakness. But maybe 2nd California, and then you get the Exploit the Gap on a big Tiger 1E. Can also win you the game with a Patriotic Zeal, maybe. So I'm interested to see how Dian plays it. I mean, I'm pretty sure he has a match plan, and I'm excited to see if it goes out.
2nd California, that gets the Patriotic Seal. So it becomes 12-6 and only goes -2, -1 whenever it takes damage. That's going to block the front line for like days.
Sounds nasty, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mark Theus, our producer, is in my ear saying we got to move on. So the next matchup we've got is Artemisia against the Man. So what we're going to do, because we can dive into the cards once the player cards once we get to the actual event. So Darkness, in 2 minutes or less, can you walk us through Artemisia's lists, please?
Yeah. Are we seeing it right now?
There it is. There it is.
There it is. Okay, Artemisia, they are usually in the OCC a very well-known tournament player. Looking at his first deck, it's Germany, Italy. It's in control deck. It's very similar to the one I already explained. It has 3 Careless Talk, Sunstrike, Decisive Descents, but it's very strong in the late game with Penta G, Tiger IE, Leopold, and Schwalbe. So we already saw this deck. The Chinese player are preparing against or with themselves to be J-King and Bubbles here as well. The second deck of Artemisia, it's an ramp deck. It looks similar to the ramp deck we already saw, but the big difference is 2 times the alliance. So the idea here is to play like honeys. He's even running 2 albacores, playing ramp, so building up units.
Next deck.
Yeah.
We don't see the correct deck. Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, we didn't saw it. So again, this is an Brit US ramp deck, having some early units with honey, albacore, Paracy, and some ramp. And on top of this, you're playing in the mid game the alliance, and everything is +2/+2. With the lot of stats British units have, like C4 Highlander and Blackwatch, this can be so crucial and so hard to break through. Nearly impossible for aggro decks after this combination pops off onto 2, better 3 units. This looks like a very strong version of Brit US ramp. It doesn't have B17s or the Avengers for the late game, so the power spike is more towards the mid game here. And the last deck of Artemisia, the next deck, it's US Poland Legions, very popular within the Chinese community. Very interesting here is the card Hell. Until 1, your Legions units gets +1/+1 when it survives combat. So I believe this card is helping you a lot in the mirror matchup when you have to trade against other infantry units like Legions. And of course it's strong against aggro like J-aggro because your units are usually surviving 1 bicycle regiment because they only deal 1 damage. And then the unit is getting buffed +1/+1 every time. Yeah, this deck is like an aggressive mid-range deck and definitely very strong. Noin 5 made this popular because he was just very, very successful with that.
Awesome, thank you, Darkness. Let's jump to the opponent of Artemisia, the man. Ollie, give me a walkthrough of these decks. I would like to bring up the fact that the man, we talked about Dion before, the man has played 3,468 games, so very much a newcomer, but we saw what Dion did in their first OCC, so I have no doubt that the man can have the potential to take this home.
All right, I'm going to do this as fast as I can, right? So you got the Soviet Italy. This is a little bit kind of curved lower on the credit cost than you would normally see. So he does have quite a bit of early game. He's rocking the 3 T60s. That's going to generate a lot of guards and ways for him to deal with any type of aggression. 845th rifles, that's all standard. Of course, has that 272nd guards we see featured there. When that dies, it spawns a Joseph Stalin. Tractor factories, winter offensive, kind of what you would expect on the Soviet side. On the Italy side, he's got the Bologna regiments, the line for a day, great removal, La Decima, take out units into the support line, and of course the Mare Nostrum. I would say fairly typical Soviet Italy control deck. Not seeing like a ton of innovation here. Here's the Soviet Union is something that is usually good to have. I'm looking at this, I'm seeing there's no Cuban Cossacks, for instance, so he's not really looking to pour on the pressure. He's looking to sit back, guard up, and outvalue his opponent over time. So we can jump on to the next one. In the next one, you got the Germany-Italy deck, another control-heavy deck. So it looks like we have a player here that really wants to control things. And I would say, you know, as a newcomer into the OCC, the man is doing a really different entry to Dion, who showed up with like baby combo for his first one. He's bringing really solid, really thought-out decks. And a big card I want to highlight here is the JU88G6. This is one of my absolutely, you know, worst cards to play against. I feel like it can punish you so hard by just trading against the right units. And basically, when you kill a unit with this fighter, you get a copy of it to your hand. So if you're able to steal the kind of clutch units from your opponent, and especially in the matchups that we're seeing today with a lot of, you know, big bombers and so on being dropped on the US side, that could be the game changer. And then we go on into the final deck, and there you got the USA Poland Legions deck. And this is something we're seeing as a recurring deck being brought by the Chinese players in this tournament, because this is an extremely popular deck within that community, pioneered by No15, who is basically the most successful Chinese tournament player at the moment. So a lot of people want to be doing what he's doing, and they're all going to be bringing kind of their own unique flair when it comes to piloting this deck. So I'm extremely excited to see it, 3 different versions of this deck being played, or like how it is being played today.
Speaking of No15, we've got No15 versus Kato in our final matchup of the day. Let us continue on at breakneck speed here. We'll have Spooz walk us through No15's list in just a second, but if you are looking for more in-depth analysis, we will of course be breaking the decks down and seeing them in action in just a few moments when the OCC kicks off. In the meantime, Spooz, tell me about what No15 is bringing today.
Yeah, the first deck of No15, and No15 usually known for playing very aggressive decks, very fast decks, and so is this US Poland Legions deck. We saw it a lot, so very popular in the Chinese community at the moment. I think each of them is bringing a deck that has this style. I think Dion is not bringing, but the other guys are bringing a deck like this, like very, very strong. You have cards like Catalina, the Skytrain, the Red Devils, also 32nd Infantry. You spam all those cheap units in the early game, and then you have several ways to go to. You can just play a We Can Do It on them, give them all +3 health so they stick on board, or you have the potential to play a Unity of Strengths, an order that is giving a unit +1/+1 for each infantry unit on board. So you can play it very, very aggressive, but with cards like Underground State and Tano Regiment, you can also play it a little bit more mid-range style. And it's very versatile, and I'm pretty sure no one knows how to pilot this deck and might be very successful with it. Then the next deck, a German US Fast Heinz deck without Fast Heinz. So the deck archetype was usually played around the card Fast Heinz, a card that gave all German tank units +2/+1. It was changed to give all tanks unit in the front line, all German tank units in the front line +2/+1. That was not strong enough, so it disappeared, was replaced by stuff like, I don't know, there's not even, stuff like We Can Do It, for example. It is way more likely that your units survive removal from your opponent, like a carpet bombing, when you give them +3 health. So a deck that is very, very aggressive. He's playing it with 3 Blitzkrieg. So potentially you can die on turn 4, turn 5 if you're not finding early guards or removal for the tanks. And a lot of them have 3 health. So stuff like United We Stand is not really killing a Panzer II there. So it can be very, very frightening, especially if your opponent is finding a Greif early on. That is a tank that is reducing the operation cost of all your tanks by 1, and a lot of these tanks only have 1 operation cost. So a deck that can pop off very, very hard, but it can also be the opposite of that, when your opponent is, for example, managing to move guard units in the front line and you cannot really establish a board there and develop your board. We saw that, I think, from Kovasnik in, I think it was in the OCC, in the Cards Open. So a deck that can have the potential, but yeah, also the opposite of that. And then the third deck, we have Britain USA. It is and the only air deck we see here. But this time usually okay, that's also nice. For playing it with Japan ally. He switched to USA now with cards like Greyhound. Also United We Stand. He's having the P38 Lightning in it. And yeah, I'm excited to see how his Brit decks developed into this direction. Also the second Paracy is in it, a card that is good to get rid of annoying stuff from an opponent. And he's also playing with 4 close air supports, a card that was recently nerfed. And maybe we should say it got changed, because it can also have some good synergies now when you have, like, it was used to buff 1 unit into a very, very big one. Now you can give more units smaller buffs, so it's harder for your opponent to make the choice which one to remove. So there's also an advantage in the change there, and we will see how good Brit Air still is after this change. Yeah, that's it.
All right, so thank you so much, Spooz. Ollie, I've been seeing you sipping on that Pepsi Max. We are open to sponsorship, but also there's probably a whole heck of a lot of caffeine in there. So let's have you walk us through the final list from Kato here before we get to the main event.
Of course. Let me bring them up here on my side so I can read them properly. Kato is interesting guy. He's the only one bringing France. So I'm... You know, this is France resistance, right? Japan resistance. We've seen this has been around for a while. There are imperial decrees. It's all about going to fatigue. Let's not waste too much time on this one. I think, you know, people can see it. They know what it is. This isn't a familiar archetype. I don't see any huge changes to this. So let's bring on to the next deck here. There we go. All right, there we go. Now we got the Germany, Italy, and this one, again, I'm seeing a lot of countermeasures coming out of the Chinese players here. There's, you know, lurking danger to draw them. There's the envelop. There's 3 careless talks. He's got wolf packs, root outs, a lot of different ways to deal with this aggression. And then you look over on the Italy side, and you see some interesting stuff that we don't see all that often. Decisive defense and the Semovente da 75-18. And I've been playing a lot of ladder recently, and I've been struggling against the Semovente if it's played in a you know, on turn 3 and then allowed to kind of sit on the field for a while. So it's going to be an interesting way to see how this plays out. A slightly different take on the Germany-Italy value deck with maybe a little bit more aggression and mid-game damage. And then we swap on over into the third deck here, and that is the Soviet-Italy. And again, you know, this by nature, it kind of plays in a control-y way, right? You have ways to heal, you have a lot of different guards, but he's also done things like put the T28 in there, which is a pincer unit, and when either the T28 or the card pincer dies, it gets put on the top of your deck. So he has possibly the ability to recycle some of these cards, and I'm specifically looking at the T60s there, because the T60s are an extremely good card to replicate, because it does not only give you a 2/4 guard unit, but when that gets killed, it gives you a 5/5 blitz unit that you can blitz out from hand and deal with any big threats in the front line. So going to be interesting to see his decks perform here. It's his first time in the OCC as well. So again, solid decks for a newcomer, and let's see how he can pilot them.
Awesome. Thank you, Ollie. Darkness, anything you want to add about this last matchup?
I think Megumi Kato is really well prepared against Noine 5. You know, Noine 5 is really strong, usually sitting at the top of the ladder, always playing his comfort decks like Heinz, US Poland, and Brit Air. And Kato just took advantage of that knowledge, you know. The Japan Franks resistance deck is really, really strong against ground unit based decks like US Poland and like the Heinz, the German tank deck. Well, it's pretty bad against air usually, but he can ban one deck, so he should be fine. The German control deck as well is really targeting those infantry decks with root out the enemy, with Bologna Regiment, with Flame Panzer, with Sudden Strikes. and so does Soviet Control. He has a ton of units. He has like a big, solid defense line, and saying, "What's up, 9-5? I ban your air, and your infantry has to run against my brick wall. Come get me."
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to see who's winning here. I would personally bet on Megumin Kato, just from the preparation. But of course, 9-5 can win against basically any deck he's facing with his crazy control, with his crazy aggro decks. Because when those aggro decks are popping off and he has the right combination, it blows out everything. So this is the last matchup in a nutshell.
I think that that's a great point, because you have this scenario where you have a relative newcomer against somebody who has proven that they are a high caliber player, but they play in the same community. So there is an opportunity for them to prepare for each other and to have some kind of visibility into the strategy.